If you're familiar with my channel, you're pretty familiar with my style. No? Well, yes, but I'm talking about how most of my videos have so far been why X series or arc is either good or bad. And while that's not exactly a bad thing to talk about, there are so many more topics to talk about in the realm of analysis that if I were to stick with that basic idea, I would never get anywhere. So let's instead talk about one aspect of one show at a time, and I'll explain what it does to reinforce that aspect and why it's so important to talk about. And since I've been watching this particular show almost non-stop, I thought it best to start with The Rising of the Shield Hero, a fairly popular show that, as of writing this script, only has 21 dubbed episodes that delves into some pretty interesting ideas that simultaneously both reflect and contrast the real-world ideas they're based on. Today, I'll start by going over how the first episode does everything it can to create a believable, sympathetic protagonist that we want to see face the odds and beat them after just the one episode. How does it do that? I'll break it down for you. So the premise of the show is pretty basic for an isekai anime. Naofumi, a regular nerd just like you and me, gets brought to another world with a medieval setting because a kingdom is on the verge of destruction, and only he, or in this case, 3 others as well, can save them and return back home. We get a short glimpse and a bit of dialogue about Naofumi's personal life before following his perspective of getting thrown into the world of Melromark. The 4 boys are called the Cardinal Heroes and are brought to Melromark with a special weapon. Ren gets a sword, Itsuki gets a bow, Motoyasu gets a spear, and Naofumi gets stuck with a shield. Their mission is to level up and get stronger, as it turns out that Melromark is actually a video game, because of course it is, and protect the world from these calamities called waves. When the waves hit, they spawn a ton of monsters everywhere and bring ruin to everything, and each of the waves are progressively stronger than the previous. Once they fight through all of them, they get to go home. Right from the start, after the basic premise has been freshly introduced, we can see that something's a little off about the way the different heroes get treated. The other 3 are regarded by name after they introduce themselves to the king, but Naofumi gets cut off before he has the chance to finish. And the other 3 get rewarded as typical saviors even when they talk shit to the king, demanding rewards. And the next day, when the country's best warriors gather to select which hero to form a party with, no one chooses Naofumi. This is because, by no fault of his own, being the shield hero leaves him stuck facing prejudice by everyone he meets. See, apparently, while Itsuki, Ren, and Motoyasu had picked up many basic things about the world they now reside in, Naofumi hadn't. The others had all experienced video games that closely resembled the world of Melromark, but Naofumi hasn't. Best he's ever seen are light novels. And this rumor somehow spread to the rest of the people overnight, and thus no one wants to pair up with the one guy who has no offensive power of his own. But after a bit, this girl that gets called Mine steps up and joins up with Naofumi, so now he at least has someone to fight for him. After all, when was the last time you saw someone use a shield as a weapon? That bit of kindness brings the viewers some hope that maybe Naofumi can possibly succeed, since he now has a party member that looks competent, and that hope only grows after we watch the 2 of them spend a full day together, buying equipment, trading goods, and fighting monsters to get some experience in. By spending so much time of the 45-minute episode focusing on Naofumi and Mine navigating this new world and learning how it works and figuring out how best to accomplish his mission, the viewer begins to really think, yeah, he's gonna be fine. Nothing bad could possibly happen here. This is when the show drops the whole act. After spending an entire night questing and grinding for experience and getting to know each other, the 2 decide to stay the night at a local inn and tavern. They stay in separate rooms, and Naofumi uses some real-world knowledge he gained to stash a few coins in between his shield and his arm, because it's best to hide your valuables in a place no one will ever think of, as his shield can never be separated from his body for more than a few seconds. I only point these things out because they come into play later. The next morning, he wakes up to find that everything has been taken from him. All his money, his gear, and the gear he spent money on to give to Mine as per her request. Running into the hallway to call for the guards, they've already shown up and demand Naofumi's presence in front of the king immediately. And as he tries explaining his situation to the king, he gets interrupted and called filth. Not only that, but Mine claims that during their stay in the inn, he pinned her down and tried to sexually assault her? She goes on by saying that she somehow got away and ran to Sir Motoyasu's room, which is interesting because she only referred to Naofumi as Sir Hero, and Motoyasu completely believed her without question, as does the king, her father. And if it wasn't bad enough that he was convicted of an attempted rape that he didn't commit, the king now says that had he not been a hero, he would have been killed on the spot. Now, because we've been following Naofumi's perspective, we know that he did not in fact rape or attempt to rape anyone, and in this scene we also learn that Mine had personally stolen all of Naofumi's belongings and gave his chainmail armor to Motoyasu as a way of manipulating him into believing her false story. And someone even planted one of her undergarments in Naofumi's room, although since we saw everything that he saw, we know that it would have had to have been planted after the fact. And to put the final nail in the coffin, Mine makes this face at him. She planned to betray him and rob him of everything he has, just to make him look pathetic and weak. Which raises the obvious question in the viewer's mind. Why the everlasting hell would anyone do this? He's one of the 4 heroes that are supposed to save the whole world from absolute calamity. Who would think it's a good idea to vilify him like this? Even the regular citizens in the room mutter that it was a mistake to even summon the shield hero at all. So it was a mistake to summon a legendary hero to help save your entire world? What kind of insanity is this? He even asks to be sent home because clearly nobody wants him there, only to be called a coward by Ren because he's, and I quote, running away when it starts to get tough. Yeah, I think being wrongly called a rapist and being threatened with death just for doing the job he was summoned to do makes starting to get tough seem like a bit of an understatement. As he walks out to live his own life and try to do his job, he remembers the money he stored in his shield. He takes one look at it and throws it to Mine and Motoyasu, adding,
"This is what you wanted, right? Shove it up your ass!"
He, like us, is completely sick of everything he has to live with, and just wants to give the rest of the world one giant f*** you before finally leaving them to do his job his own way. This whole situation is a perfect example of why it is okay to spend perfect logic in favor of more emotionally heightened storytelling. This mess Naofumi is dropped in makes absolutely no sense. But it's because of this fact that we want to see him overcome the world that is denying him the basic rights the other heroes and even regular people automatically get just because he got stuck with the shield. This world doesn't make sense. And that fact makes sense because it's filled with and run by flawed people with their own conflicts of interest and personal values to uphold ahead of giving Naofumi a modicum of respect. Here, watch this clip from the show.
But news of your crime is already spreading among the people. That is your punishment. You should never expect to be allowed to lead a decent life in this country.
Yeah, clearly.
All he wants to do is fight off the waves and go home, and he's being denied that for reasons outside of his control. So as of this moment, he decides to forsake the society and the people who wronged him and fight his own way. How does he do that? All of that gets explained by the rest of the show. I can't really talk about it here because the focus in this video is how the first episode of the show does a fantastic job of creating a believable and sympathetic protagonist that we actively want to see beat all the odds, come out a much stronger person, and finally go home to a world that respects him as a human being. And although this is a simple setup, it's also effective in that all we now want to see is Naofumi succeed by his own merit. And the rest of the episode does a good job giving us the slightest bit of hope that, even though we have no idea how, maybe he just barely can. And I'll be sure to talk about exactly how he does it, as well as a couple of other aspects of the rising of the shield hero in the next video or two, interspliced with others maybe. Because something about this show has really sparked some creativity in me. Join me eventually for more discussion and analysis of this show. I absolutely cannot wait to see you then. I'm Van Campone, and I will see you guys next time.